So this morning, you can turn to the book of Exodus, and we're going to start our new series. And while you're admiring this amazing graphic that AI generated for us, let me tell you the backstory on this. While I'm pulling up my Keynote app, I'm going to try to take control of the slideshow here. Hopefully this works. Oh yes, it seems to be working. Oh yes, it's working. Thank you, Pastor Rob. I think he's watching from Texas right now. He walked me through this. Keep him in prayers. By the way, he's going to be preaching this morning out there at their service, and he's had lots of good opportunities. He and I have checked in a few times this week, and he's been sharing some of the things that are going on out there, and the encouragement that he's received and the encouragement he's been able to be to other people. So it's going well. I know he appreciates your support and prayers. So the backstory on this graphic, this week I was working on the message and really excited about the book of Exodus because it's one of my favorites. And so I reached out to Brian Prada, our esteemed worship leader, and I said, Brian, what do I do? I want to create a graphic. How do I do that? And Brian, who is way more tech savvy than me, he said, hey man, just go into ChatGPT, just punch in what you want it to do and it'll do it. And I said, but Brian, you know that violates every core principle that I hold dear. Anyone who knows me knows I cannot stand AI. I have a huge problem with AI. So I'm glad at least one person is with me on that, probably more than one with me on that. So I want you to know I feel ashamed, I feel guilty, but I cannot deny that I absolutely love that graphic. So I'm conflicted, but this is our series. It's called The Way Out, and you will see as we move through this morning's message why we're calling it The Way Out. It is, as I said, one of my favorite books in the Bible, as it reveals to us actually what we just finished singing about, the goodness of God. It just shows us the goodness of God in magnificent ways. It's an ancient story, but it's a story that we can all relate to and that we can all learn from. And it's a story that helps us to, and this is the title for this morning's message, it helps us to find our place in God's story. That's what the book of Exodus really does, and we'll see that as we move through for the next several weeks, and really it'll take us a few months. But as we prepare to begin this morning looking at this great book together, I want to ask you a question that may seem a little bit random, but just bear with me, okay? The question is this: what is your favorite movie? Now don't shout it out, just in the privacy of your own mind, lest a brawl break out in here over which movie is better. Just in the privacy of your own mind, what is your favorite movie? So just picture it, think about it for a moment. Now, if I were to ask you, why is that your favorite movie, you would probably tell me about your favorite characters, the plot line, things about it that excite you or make you laugh or maybe make you cry, things that move you, all sorts of things that you like about it. And if I asked you this question, this deeper probing question, okay, but why do you like movies at all? Why do you like stories? Why are we drawn to characters and plot lines and plot twists and triumph and tragedy and conflict? Why are we drawn to such things? That's a deeper question, isn't it? Whether you're a movie buff, which most of us like movies, but even if you're not a movie person, you like books, whatever, but I mean like stories. Why are we drawn to stories? I think the deepest answer we can give to that question is that we were created in the image of a God who is a storyteller. He's a storyteller. In fact, all of human history is the telling of his story. And our lives, your life, my life, part of that same story. It's a great story. It's a redemptive story. Every detail of it matters. So we love stories. We're drawn to them. I Googled this. the film industry makes somewhere in the ballpark of $400 to $500 billion every year. Billion with a B. Yeah, I Googled it, as I said, which indicates I don't have the same conflict, I don't have the same complicated relationship with Google that I have with AI. I'm much more apt to use that. But evidence that we do, we love stories. Years ago, I read a good book called The Happiness Hypothesis, in which a social psychologist was examining. He went back historically to think through different philosophical systems, different religions, and different studies that have been done on this issue of like happiness. What is it that makes people happiest in life? And just from a human perspective, from a psychological perspective, you know what they found? People tend to be happiest when they can identify themselves with some kind of transcendent story, when they see their lives as part of a meaningful story. But then in the end of the book, he leaves you just sort of guessing as to what that story is, almost leaves you to author your own story. And what we see in Scripture and what we'll learn from the book of Exodus is that God has not left us to try to come up with our own story. He's the author with a capital A. He's telling the story, and he invites us to recognize his story, to appreciate his story, and to find our place in his story. And that is the place of deepest satisfaction, deepest joy, and deepest freedom. That's what we're going to see. So 3 main points this morning, 3 main ideas. Okay, we're going to talk about Exodus as we begin. This will be a little bit unique because we're just going to kind of set the framework of this study, just introduce it. We're going to see, first of all, that it is a story, the Exodus story is a story about real people. Secondly, it's a story about conflict, and we'll talk about that a bit. And thirdly, it's a story about freedom. It's a story about real people, it's a story about conflict, and it's a story about freedom. Read with me Exodus chapter 1, verses 1 through 7. Right away, we are introduced to some characters here. It says, starting in verse 1, "Now these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were 70 in number, but Joseph was already in Egypt. Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them." Okay, pause there. I mean, just read a lot of names about a lot of different people. And some of you are very familiar with the Exodus story. You know the history of Israel, and these names ring a bell to you. Okay, others of you, they don't. Maybe these are foreign names to you, but what matters the most is you would understand that this is a family. These are descendants of a man named Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and why that is, we'll talk about a little bit later in the message. But Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and his descendants. These are his 12 sons. And so if you've heard of the 12 tribes of Israel, they are descendants of these 12 sons. And they're listed here. And this is describing a time, in terms of the setting, this is describing a time in which the children of Israel were living in a foreign land, in Egypt, a land not their own. So this is about real people. It's about Israel. It's about Moses, who is basically the key figure, the main character from a human perspective, like the good guy. Of course, we're going to see that he's not all that good. Not in every way. And then it's the story about the Egyptians and who they were. And they were like the most powerful, most wealthy nation of that time. And Pharaoh, the king, the leader of the Egyptians, who is the bad guy, so to speak, the villain in the story. It's a story about these ancient people, and it's a story about you. It's a story about you too. Because what you'll see as we move through is that these ancient people are a lot like you. They're people with desires and fears, people with ambitions and goals, people who loved others and at times hated others. There's tension and hostility. There's a lot going on. And they're people just like you, living in a different time, dressed in different clothes, different environment, but yet human beings. And as Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun, right? Nothing new under the sun. So it'll be about these people, and it's about God. Now, he hasn't even been mentioned yet. Sometimes he's in the background. Sometimes he's in the foreground. But this story is all about our Creator God, from start to finish. As he works in and through people, as he involves himself in miraculous ways, impressive ways, sometimes surprising ways, and we're going to see some of those. So it's about these people, it's about God, and most mysteriously, it's about Jesus. This story is about Jesus, written somewhere around 1500 years before Jesus even came into this world, and yet it's about him. In every detail, it points to him. There's a place in the New Testament where Jesus is debating back and forth with religious leaders who prided themselves in their knowledge of the Old Testament, including the book of Exodus, who were followers of Moses, and yet they were rejecting Jesus. They weren't seeing him as their Messiah. They were opposing him at every turn. And Jesus says to them, listen, if you believe Moses, then you would believe me, because he was writing about me. The book of Exodus is about Jesus as well. And we will see and experience all the life-giving help and freedom of that reality as we go through this series. So it's about real people, and it's a story about conflict. Now I want you to picture this for a moment. You movie lovers out there, I want you to picture a movie about a guy, and we'll call him Bob, okay? A guy named Bob. And we'll call this movie The Boring Life of Bob. What happens in this movie is Bob is just a normal, middle-aged dude who just goes to work every day. And he works in a manufacturing plant. And he goes and he does the same thing every day, all day long. And he comes home each day, and he walks his dog, and he kisses his wife, and he eats his dinner, and he watches some TV, and he goes to bed, and he gets up the next day, and he does the same thing over and over. I see people yawning out there right now. Oh, I told you it's called The Boring Life of Bob. I told you that for a reason. Like, how much of that would you watch before you said, can someone just please blow something up? Just like do something. We wouldn't even be able to watch. It would bore us to tears. Listen, there's conflict in this world. We all know we have internal conflict. We have conflict with other people. All different kinds of conflict, and we're drawn to it, and we know that it's meaningful. And even the way we appreciate stories and movies, like there's always some kind of tension, isn't there? Well, this story has a whole lot of it. There's going to be conflict between Moses and Pharaoh. In fact, you see foreshadowing of that. Look at the text again in front of you. Look how it moves from verse 7 to verse 8. And perhaps you'll notice here the foreshadowing. Verse 7 says, the sons of Israel, and remember, they were in Egypt, they're in a foreign land, and it says they were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. Notice verse 8. Now, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Joseph was the Israelite who in previous generations had favor with Pharaoh, and that's how the Israelites ended up in Egypt in the first place. And that was a peaceful experience for them in the beginning. But here we are many years later, and the Israelites have multiplied, and now the new Pharaoh says, I don't remember why these people are here, but they're a threat to me. So you can sense this tension building here. If we were watching a movie at this point, it would be the dun, 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 what is happening, right? It would be that kind of feel. A new king arises in Egypt who did not know Joseph. So there will be conflict. Conflict between the Israelites and the Egyptians, Moses and Pharaoh. And this is fascinating, there will be conflict, get this, with God himself. There'll be conflict with God. Now, the name Israel, we talked earlier about Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And there's a reference to that in verse 1 there, we saw. You know, and if you know your Bibles, many of you are familiar with the story. Jacob is the one who wrestled with God, right? All night long. God entangles him to teach him things. And then changes his name from Jacob to Israel. And Israel in Hebrew means one who wrestles with God. Israel himself, as an individual, wrestled with God. All his descendants wrestled with God. You and I today, we wrestle with God. And you might ask, well, wait a minute, what do you mean I wrestle with God? I mean, I'm a follower of God. I'm a follower of Jesus. I don't wrestle with God. Well, let me ask you, when you think about your life and the details of it, the things you've been through, especially the hardest things. Right. Disease, divorce, failed business, broken relationship of some other kind. I mean, the hardest things, the things that make you like ask these deep questions, and the question is specifically, why? I mean, if God's the author, if he's the divine orchestrator, if he's in control, then isn't it appropriate that we would all ask the question sometimes like, why? It's evidence of our wrestling. And the Bible says in the New Testament that when we have desires that overtake us, that control us, enslave us, and do damage to us and others, the book of James says those are desires that are vertical in nature. Really, they're against our Maker. When we take even the good gifts of God and we cling to them too tenaciously so that it becomes destructive, that is evidence that we're like tangling with God. There's some opposition to Him. There's all different ways that we wrestle with God. We all do. And if you think, well, I don't sense that I do, maybe it's just that you haven't lived long enough. Maybe in the future you will. It's very common to wrestle with God. It's what the name Israel means, and it's what God really intends, even for good, for His people. He teaches us the most through the wrestling that goes on. So it's a story about people, real people. It's a story about conflict. And thirdly, it's a story about the way out. Another little definition here, the title Exodus means literally the way out. From the preposition ek or ex and the term hodos or ados. The way out. Exodus is about the way out. Once again, we can pause for a moment and just consider, are there areas of my life that I'm looking for a way out? That too is common, isn't it? We might be looking for a way out of some bad relationship, bad job, a bad physical condition. Like, how do I fix this? How do I get to where my body feels better? I mean, we look for a way out. It's common. It's something we all experience. And if it's extreme in its pressure and stress in our lives, we're going to even be more zealous to find a way out. Well, this story is about not just a way out, but the way out. And not just a physical way out, but more importantly, a spiritual way out. Not just in some outward way, but in some internal way. Now, there is an outward sense of this, and the story, those of you who are familiar with it know, this is about the Israelites being stuck in Egypt, the new Pharaoh. We're going to see the details of it later, but he rises up and he says, I got to put these people to work. I got to oppress them. I got to keep them weak and enslaved so they don't become a problem for me here. And so there's this abusive relationship between Pharaoh and the Israelites as he just beats them to oblivion. And they cry out, they need rescue, they need help. They're unarmed, they're weak, there's nothing they can do. The Egyptians are like the most advanced military at that time. They're hopeless and helpless, and they need God to come along and do something they could never do. Only God can provide the way out. Generations earlier, Abraham, we won't turn there, but you know from the book of Genesis, many of you, that God calls Abraham, and he's like the patriarch, okay? So Jacob or Israel and all these other descendants, they really come from the line of Abraham, and God is the one who said to Abraham, Abraham, go out from this familiar place and I'm going to give you your own place for your family. And it's going to be a special place. That's what the promise was. And as Abraham had children, one after another, God reiterated that promise of a land and blessing. It's called the Abrahamic covenant, this arrangement God makes with Abraham. But as time goes by, you realize there's this problem because they don't get to fully settle in that place God had promised them. And now in the book of Exodus, generations later, they're stuck in Egypt of all places. And so it's about a way out, moving from one place to another place. It's about that. God is going to take them from Egypt, release them, set them free, and bring them toward the promised land, the land that He had promised to their ancestor Abraham. Now here's the thing. Think about this carefully. Okay, Jeff, you just said they started off in one place. God promised Abraham a land. God even brought Abraham and some of his descendants to a close, in approximation, like a place that was close to that promised land. And then the same God ordains that they should be moved all the way down to Egypt, like a couple 100 miles away, which in those days was harder to traverse than today. A couple 100 miles away. And in the book of Exodus, He says, I'm going to bring you back to that promised land. Now, so if you're just thinking carefully, they were basically there. God takes them away from there, only to come along later and bring them back there. Do you see the curious nature of this? Like, wait a minute. Couldn't He be more efficient? Couldn't He skip a step? Why not just leave them there and just cause them to settle and give them peace and make them flourish there? Why move them all the way to Egypt first and have them go through all this pain and all this suffering and all this confusion and all these questions? Why? Sounds like a familiar question, doesn't it? Why? Why does God work in these ways? Well, He has His reasons. And one of His reasons is He's not just trying to change their environment circumstantially or situationally. He's trying to bring about a change relationally. You see, He's drawing them not just to some better place, He's drawing them to Himself to see who He really is, to develop that relationship. And that involves and even requires pain and suffering and hardship and loss and weakness and failure and need. And so God designs the whole thing to set them free, to show them the way out. And spoiler alert, the way out is not just the way to the promised land, it's the way back to God. Jesus said in the Gospel of John, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and there's no way to the Father except through me. Jesus is the way, the Hodos. Remember ex-Hodos? Jesus is the Hodos. He's the way. He's the way back to God. And when it comes to their lives, what we're going to see is that God is leading them along through ups and downs and twists and turns, all to bring them close back to Himself. And He's doing, ready for this? He's doing the same thousands of years later in your life and my life today. This is what He's up to. It's a journey of the heart and the soul as God teaches us of Himself and His ways and His kindness. There's a proverb in Proverbs 14 and verse 12 that says, there is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. So God brings us to the way of life. So I'm going to show you, I have a little graphic here for you. Hopefully you can see. Oops, I go the wrong way. There we go. Okay, hopefully you can see that. The story of Exodus is about moving from the left side of that heart to the right side. From slavery to freedom. From work to rest. From earning to receiving. From death to life. These are heart-level realities. This is what God is up to. So often in our lives, we want to make a change, and that can be fully appropriate. Sometimes we have to make a change, and that's a good thing. But more deeply, what God is, we can be sure, always up to, even and especially when He doesn't allow us some circumstantial change, is He's up to this kind of change in the heart, like the true us, the deepest part of us. He's bringing us from slavery to freedom, from work to rest, from earning to receiving, from death to life. And that little arrow in the middle, that looks nice and neat and tidy, doesn't it? Do you think that the progression from the left side to the right side is nice and neat and tidy? Or is that more like wrestling? It's wrestling, isn't it? God brings us through things to bring us to the end of ourselves, to surface our own pride and independence, our own unhealthy ways of thinking and relating, and He just shows us how at the spiritual level we are still slaves to our own desires. And we work and we work and we work, and we just find ourselves exhausted and burdened and addicted and stuck. And we're just earning, like if I don't do this, it's not going to happen. I got to get this for myself. And it's just death because it's just not in union with our Creator. It's just separate from Him. And there's just darkness and guilt and shame. It's death. And God loves us enough. We sang the song, I will sing of the goodness of God. And over, remember the refrain, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. That's what this story is about. God running after His people to set us free. From being addicted to establishing our own identity and demanding things of ourselves and other people that just weigh us down, and bringing us to freedom in relationship with Him through Jesus. Now I got to say, I talk about this with my girls all the time. On the left side there, the concept of work and earning and things like that, especially the two in the middle. Like those aren't bad things inherently. Like it's good in this world, naturally speaking, to work, to study, to improve, to attend to our minds and growing intellectually, physically, exercise, accomplishing things, productivity. That's good, that's healthy. The challenge is the seductive temptation beneath all those activities where we just think we have to be like God. We have to be bigger and better and have more. And that's what we do so much damage to ourselves through. And so much damage relationally through. And we just feel like we're on this hamster wheel that never ends. That's where the exhaustion comes from, when we just think that we've got to be the author of our own story, the determiner of our own destiny. Like when that weight and burden is on our shoulders, that's where the darkness comes in, isn't it? That's when we taste the banquet in the grave. That's when we experience death, spiritually speaking. And we have a loving God who appeals to us and who is bringing us even through the details of our lives to get us from spiritual slavery to spiritual freedom, from spiritual work to spiritual rest, from spiritual earning to spiritual receiving, just the gifts of God's grace, from spiritual death to spiritual life. And spiritual life is being in relationship with our Creator. And the good news is He's done everything necessary for us to have that relationship. There's not one thing you could do. There's not one thing you have to do. It's all been done by Jesus, which is why on the cross He says, "It is finished." So we are in relationship with Him because of Christ. And we will see in spectacular ways. I mean, I love this book and all the ways it points us to the greatness of Jesus. It's going to be awesome. We'll enjoy it together. Okay, some closing thoughts here. Bring the slide back up. You can admire that a little bit more. Thank you, AI. As we close, can we talk just a little bit more about your story? Your personal story, okay? If you could watch a movie of your life from the beginning to now, if you could watch a movie of your life, would you watch it? I mean, maybe not all the details, maybe just the high points. Well, for sure, we would edit like certain things, right, out. Yeah, like a whole lot of things. Yeah. Some of you would say, you know what, look, even if I could edit, I don't even know what I would leave unedited. I don't even know like what wouldn't end up on the editing floor. Some of you might say, I don't think I'd watch any of it. For others of you, it's like, all right, certain things, the abuse I endured, the addiction I've been plagued by, maybe still am, the broken relationships, the wreckage, the damage, the financial mistakes. I mean, like, you can just on and on and on. I mean, it could be something literally that happened to you this morning that you're like, I just want to forget that. I mean, would you watch it? In counseling, I often ask people, I have a limited amount of time, but I'll ask people questions like, hey, give me one of your best memories from childhood. And then I'll ask another question, give me maybe one of your worst memories from childhood. And it's fascinating the different things you hear. And over the years, I've had people say, look, I literally can't give you one positive. And that is heartbreaking. And I've had other people say, it's mostly positive. I really can't give you any negatives. I mean, you hear all different types of stories. So now back to you and your particulars, your life, the details. Would you watch it? What's amazing is that God has been watching it all the way through. He's been watching it. He claims to be the author of your story. In fact, it says in the book of Acts that God appointed the very place of our habitation, like the time in which we would live, the family we would have. Like He placed us right where He placed us. He says, if perhaps we might grope for God and find Him. And then He says, and He is not far from any one of us. Down to the details. God is the author of our story. You matter to Him. You are not a cosmic orphan. Your life is not meaningless. It's very meaningful. Every day matters. Every person matters. Every encounter matters. And in your story, just like the story we're going to study together, He is showing you the way out. Maybe not the way out of a place, although we're all making our way out of this world at some point, aren't we? Not to bring up a morbid reality, but that is true. We're on our way out at some point. But I mean, he's showing us the way out at a deeper level. Like he's going to show us more and more about himself. He's going to invite us to trust in him and his promises and his provisions. He's going to help us to appreciate the fact that he's involved in our lives when we realize it and even when we don't. And that through Jesus, he has done everything necessary for us to know we have a relationship with him that is reconciled and restored and right. That he has provided full forgiveness. In fact, he has cleansed and washed away. Remember all the dark things? Part of our story? All the guilt, all the shame. He has washed it all away. He attends to every hurt, every loss. He's a God of all comfort, it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. He's the God of all comfort, who cares. He's not bored by our stories. He's not dozed off. I kill my family sometimes. Well, Dad, let's watch a movie together, and like 3 minutes in, I'm asleep. Are you with me on that? He doesn't fall asleep. He's involved in every single moment. And he helps us to see, though he's invisible, that he is a God of great love and great mercy. And he's done everything necessary for us to have the way out, the way back to him, our good Creator. Would you close in prayer with me